For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5956.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 5956, a bill to incentivize the hiring of United States workers in the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Bishop, and the gentleman from the Northern Mariana Islands, Mr. Sablan, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Utah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials in the bills under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, and then I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support H.R. 5956. The Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Islands had a political union with the United States back in 1986. As part of that covenant, which has several different elements that make it unique among all the territories as well as the other states, it authorized a local level of established programs to permit foreign workers to enter into the Northern Marianas. 2008, I believe it was, that Congress established this law to create a standard with the goal of actually trying to reduce the annual number of permits given to eventually, hopefully, to zero, to stabilize so the workforce became more American. 3 years later, they finally came up with a way of implementing that, relatively quick for U.S. government standards. But the citizenship program that was established, the CW permit program, unfortunately, it doesn't quite work as we had thought it might do. So in 2017, GAO reported that since 2013, demand for these permits had doubled, and in fiscal year 2016, the demand exceeded the number of the caps that we have on these particular permits. The bottom line is simply this idea of having an American workforce is wonderful, but you have an area with a small population, with a good economy, which means there is low unemployment, and for some reason there's not a whole lot of Americans who want to travel a 15-hour plane ride to get to their work destination. There is a need for a foreign workforce on these particular islands, and in some areas it is unique. It is estimated that between 80% of all the hospitality and construction jobs need to be filled by a foreign workforce. I know in the hospital that's there. If we don't make a change in this, all of the nurses will no longer be eligible to stay on the island and do that needed service. So what it is, and if actually we don't make some kind of adjustments in these caps, it could have a negative impact on the economy of the Northern Marianas, anywhere between 30 and 60%, shortchanging their gross national product. So the intent of this particular bill in this version is threefold. Number one, we want to increase the percentage of U.S. workers in total workforce in the Marianas, while maintaining certain number of non-U.S. workers to meet the demands of the Northern Marianas economy. Number two, encourage the hiring of U.S. workers into the Northern Mariana workforce. And number three, and this is perhaps the important one, to ensure that no U.S. worker is at a competitive disadvantage compared to any non-U.S. worker or is going to be displaced by a non-U.S. worker. But until that time is accomplished, this bill will have some flexibility on those caps, and it will be permitted to extend beyond the 2019 date to 2029, so we can see how it does not work. This bill gives necessary relief to the Northern Marianas. So I want to thank the gentleman from Northern Marianas, Mr. Sablan, for working with us on this bill. I'm also grateful for the government of the Northern Marianas. Governor Torres has been in constant communication with us. He is supportive of what we are attempting to do. And oddly enough, I want to thank our colleagues in the Senate, who are also supportive of this particular idea, even if they drafted somewhat of an inartful piece of legislation, so we have to come at it one more time. But there is agreement that this is the proper thing to do, so this Commonwealth can actually maintain a steady workforce and maintain an economy that will continue to grow in the future. And all the significant players on the island, in the territory, are in support of what we are attempting to do. So I obviously urge adoption of this measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Utah reserves. The gentleman from the Northern Mariana Islands, Mr. Sablan, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I use myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Bishop has just provided an accurate statement of the economic rationale for the Northern Mariana Islands US Workforce Act, H.R. 5956. The U.S. Workforce Act will allow the Marianas economy to continue growing, so there is ample opportunity for new business investments and for jobs. I want to use my time simply to emphasize that this bill is about jobs, jobs for U.S. workers in my district. The bill contains new requirements to ensure that no U.S. worker is ever passed over for a job, and that wages and working conditions for U.S. workers are always maintained and protected. It ensures the fees employers pay are put to effective use, providing better training and apprenticeship opportunities for U.S. workers. And the bill encourages the continuing conversion of the Marianas economy to one to which, numerically, U.S. workers are predominant. And that is why the legislation is titled the Northern Mariana Islands US Workforce Act. That is a statement of our purpose and our goal. I say our purpose because this legislation is the product of a bipartisan and bicameral working group. It included Chairman Bishop and Ranking Member Grijalva, their committee leaders counterparts in the other body, Judiciary Committee representatives, and myself. We began in late 2016 working first on the legislation that became Public Law 115-53. And it was not easy finding common ground among such a diversity of views. But by listening to each other and because we share a common concern to better the lives of Americans, even Americans in the faraway Marianas, we succeeded in agreeing on this second bill, the U.S. Workforce Act. A very good bill with very good policy. As a delegate, Mr. Chairman, I cannot vote for this bill. I can, however, give my vote of thanks to Chairman Bishop. But because even a good bill with good policy has to navigate the twists and turns of the legislative process. And without the chairman's leadership, we might not be here on the floor today considering the U.S. Workforce Act. I thank him and leadership on both sides of the aisle whose attention and cooperation helped me bring this bill to the floor. And thanks to all of the working group members who helped the people of the Northern Marianas by working with me to draft this legislation. Lastly, thanks to my constituents. Over the last 10 years, they have shared their own experiences with me and given me their ideas on what federal policy would best fit our islands. I listened to them and spoke for them. And we have incorporated their experiences and their ideas into the U.S. Workforce Act. I believe my constituents' needs are well represented because this legislation has the full support of the Marianas governor and legislature and of the business community and of the men and women who meet and talk with me in everyday life. In closing, I ask my colleagues for their support of the Northern Mariana Islands US Workforce Act. And seeing no other speakers, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Utah is recognized.
Once again, I wish to thank the gentleman from Northern Marianas for helping with this particular bill. I am very grateful also to Governor Torres of the Commonwealth, to the business community there. I think we found a practical solution to a real problem that could create harm for this Commonwealth. I'm very proud of that area. Visited it once. I hope to go back there again and notice the economic growth that continues there in Northern Marianas. With that, I'll yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Bill H.R. 5956? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition?
It wasn't 2/3, that was unanimous. Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend.